Hi, I'm Cynthia Clark. As a soulmate palmist, I've discovered a system using hand analysis to identify your soulmate matches. Greater love is possible for you. There are 6 keys to soulmate attraction. There are 10 heart chambers in your hands that show you exactly what you need to heal. I can help you untangle dating confusion and work with the vibrational energy to change your vibration. True love exists for you if you claim it. Join me at loveinyourhands.com and find soulmate love fast. Hello there, my friends. How are you doing today? My name is Cynthia Clark, and I am your soulmate palmist and spiritual teacher. If you're interested in learning how to find love, you can simply go over to loveinyourhands.com. So, today I am going to be talking about a very important topic, and that has to do with self worth. So, today we're going to look at why self worth is so important, what is the real value behind it. I'm also going to teach you about 8 different markers that actually show up in your hands, and you can learn if you have a challenge in self worth. And then I'm going to offer an unusual and unique way to build your self worth that I actually learned from my very own dreams. Which, if you watched last week or listened last week, you will understand that dreams are incredibly important and they actually teach you messages from your higher self. So, anyway, it's going to be a lot of fun, and I hope you get some good value out of today's message. So, the first thing I want to talk about is self worth. Okay, why is self worth so important? Well, if you have very low self worth, you are either going to not attract anybody at all, because of course you won't have the confidence, the ability to actually ask somebody out. You know, you might chicken out. You might feel like, well, they're way above me. Why should I even bother? You know, when you see that person that you want to maybe ask out. Or, and I consider this one even worse, is you may attract somebody, but you may attract a person who is actually your what I call the fatal attraction, which is somebody who initially comes across as really nice and friendly, and wow, they're so into me. I've hit the jackpot. And then what happens? They turn into this crazy person that you had no idea that they had that inside of them. And suddenly you find yourself apologizing all the time and you're always wrong. Okay, so that's actually an experience I went through myself uh, a while ago, thankfully. I'm happily remarried now, but I know exactly what it's like when your self worth is that low. The kind of people that you're going to attract is not going to be your soulmate match, is not going to be that person that you really want to spend the rest of your life with. So that is why it is so critical that you build up your self worth. And this is such a huge problem with so many people that I would say it's the number 2 life lesson that you can find in your fingerprints. So if you happen to know about your fingerprints, this one is located on your left hand in the middle finger, left Saturn finger. It shows up as a life lesson, and it is incredibly common. So, this is something that almost all of us have to work through on some level. So, you can actually see this in your hands also in other ways. So, it's what I would call the devaluing markers. So, how do we devalue ourselves? Okay, well, the first place you want to look is your Apollo finger. Okay, and the Apollo finger is, of course, your ring finger. Okay, so I'm going to actually draw this so you can, if you're watching, you can see it. And if you're listening, I'll describe it. But it's going to be, you have three phalanges on all of your fingers. And the Apollo finger is your finger of how you present yourself to the world. So, this upper zone, the zone that has your fingernail on it, is called your zone of individuality. And when this section of your finger is stressed or blocked, it's going to actually be a small section relative to the other phalanges, or it might have some horizontal lines going through that section. So that's one way to identify if you're, uh, devaluing yourself. Okay, so another way to tell is your Jupiter finger, which is your index finger. Okay, so this is actually the finger of power. It's your vision finger. It's also how you look at yourself. And occasionally this finger will bend, and the most common bend will be to see it bending towards the middle finger. Okay, now if this is the case, it's showing that your self worth is literally bending and not being, we want to see all of our fingers standing up tall and straight. Okay, that's how they need to be. So anytime a finger bends, that actually shows a stress to the finger and what the finger represents. So for Jupiter, it's how you look at yourself, it's how you're actually living by your ideals. And when it starts to curve towards that middle finger, it's saying that you're not living up to your ideals of who you are and who you could be. So that I consider that problematic. If it actually bends the other way, that's less common, but that shows more of a seeking freedom, because this is also like a freedom finger. Okay, so we want to specifically look for the bend going towards the middle finger. Okay, so next up, we have Apollo. Okay, so we also want to see if Apollo is bending. And usually it would be bending again towards the middle finger. Quite common to see this. And so when Apollo is, and sometimes it also shows up as a leaning. So it might not just be a bend, it could be a kind of almost a toppling of the finger. But this is going to show you that you are sacrificing yourself, your individuality, how you show yourself to the world, and it's for some other reason. Okay, so Saturn is the finger of duty and responsibility, and it shows a sacrifice in oftentimes when people, like creative people especially, they take jobs that are not really appropriate for them. They will see a toppling Apollo finger quite often. So definitely something you wanted to look out for, and it's a form of devaluation. Okay, the next thing you could look for is, again, sticking with this Apollo finger. Take a look and see if it's wasted. Okay, and what I mean by that is that the finger actually cinches in, like somebody took a belt and wrapped it around the finger and tightened the belt. Okay. Now, all of your fingers can actually do this, but we especially want to look at this Apollo finger and see if it's wasted. And this is an indication that you feel like you don't fit in, you don't belong. There's something not quite right with you. By the way, of course, it doesn't mean that this is true. So again, I want to point that out. Like, this is how you're actually seeing yourself. Your hands are reflecting how you experience the world. And we all experience the world differently. So that's why we can analyze the hands and understand what's going on psychologically. It's so fascinating how much information your hands actually have to tell you. It's really, really valuable. So that, and people who have these markers, like I said, I'll have a solution for you that's really funny and unique. So I hope you enjoy it. But yeah, so this is what we're looking at. By the way, if you're just tuning in, this is Cynthia Clark, your soulmate palmist from loveinayourhands.com, and we are talking about self worth. So, next up, we want to look at devaluing ourselves. Okay, in the next way that it might show up, it does show up also in lines. Okay, so one line that you want to look for is, we just call it a challenge line, and it's called the Apollo challenge line. And it will actually go straight across your hand. It usually starts in your Mars mount or sometimes in your Venus mount, which is over by your thumb. And it will go kind of diagonally across the hand over to Apollo, and it will usually end either right underneath the Apollo finger, or it will end in between Apollo and the little finger Mercury. So this, we just call this a criticism challenge line. Okay, so this is when you have an inner critic that could be going crazy, or you have you're taking in other people's criticism, which, by the way, you don't ever have to take in other people's criticism. You just need to uh, be kind. Be kind to yourself. Okay, that's what I recommend. But yeah, so this line, like all the lines in the hand, they can actually come in and they can also fade out. So that's one area you want to check, is that Apollo challenge line. So another one you want to check for is your heart line. Now, of course, your heart line has to do with the way that you feel. Okay, so feelings are important, and it's going to be located here at the top of your hand. It's going to be the uppermost line in your hand. Okay, so the middle of your hand has the headline. The one that wraps around your thumb ball is your lifeline, and the uppermost line is your heart line. And occasionally, what will happen here is you will have what's called dropping crosses. Okay, and they look like little crosses or little X's underneath the heart line. Okay, so if you have any of these, that is an indicator that you feel unsupported by other people. Okay, so if it shows up underneath Apollo, then it means you're feeling unsupported by the group. And if it's over here in between, this is like your zone of intimacy right here. And if it shows up closer to your Mercury finger, then it's more of an intimate partner that you feel unsupported from. Okay, now again, you have to support yourself. You have to feel the support for yourself first, and then you'll start to see it reflected in other people. Now, sometimes we have relationships and we get into relationships, like I was telling you about those fatal attractions, and we figure out, oh my gosh, this is not the kind of relationship I was looking for. Relationships, of course, are mirrors. That's one of the golden truths of relationships. And the person who is not being respectful to you, what they're actually doing is that they don't feel good about themselves, and they're just projecting that onto you. So this is something that they need to learn. So this goes back to a lot of people, it goes back to childhood, when your parents maybe didn't give you approval, or um, maybe your classmates, maybe you got laughed at when you were in school and class and you weren't approved of. And then your self-worth, of course, goes down and you feel terrible, right? But you also need to realize that the people throwing those stones, they don't feel good about themselves. And they are actually very unhappy inside at some level. And they're trying to prop themselves up by making you feel worse. Okay, so this is just something that needs to be dealt with on that spiritual level, and we need to take responsibility for ourselves, for how we feel. And that's why we analyze our hands, so that we can actually see, okay, what could be a problem for me? And if it's showing up as a fingerprint challenge, that is a soul level. You carried it in with you in this lifetime. If it's showing up as a line, that's actually the best thing, because that's the most changeable. and it's the easiest to change. If it's showing up in a finger, then it means that it's probably been going on for a long time and it might take a little bit more work to actually shift it. Okay, so there's one other place I was going to show you where you could be devaluing yourself, and it's in what's called a Palmer print. And this one is also quite common. So, just like you have fingerprints in your fingertips, you also have prints that show up in your palm. Okay. And there is one type of fingerprint that shows up right underneath that Apollo finger. We call it the ego loop. And it looks like a little horseshoe type configuration, like a loop. Okay, so I'm going to draw this in on my whiteboard here. And if you can't see it, or if you're just listening, take a look at the print underneath your ring finger and see if you have a loop pattern right underneath the finger. Okay, this is very important. If it's showing up in between a finger, it is not the ego loop, it would be something else. Quite a few different markers actually show up in this area. So it would have to be directly under the finger. Okay, so that's something you want to check for. We call that the ego loop, and that's when you can be very critical of yourself. And again, this is a fingerprint type pattern, meaning that it actually forms 5 months before you're born. So pretty amazing, right? Okay, so if you have any of these things, that is an indication that you might be devaluing yourself. Okay, so now on to the solution. It's like, okay, what do we do? What do we do about this? Oh my gosh, I'm doomed. Okay, well, the good news is you're not doomed. You're never doomed, by the way. The universe always supports you and is wanting you to move out of challenges, move out of problems, and become better than ever so that you can have the relationship of your dreams. You can attract that soulmate partner. And the more you build up your own self worth, the more you are going to find that all of your relationships are actually going to get better and better. And this, it always starts with yourself. So you need to have that worth for yourself. And it's a respect. And it's not to be arrogant. Okay, so it's not arrogance. It's not showing that you're better than someone else. It's not being belligerent. It's not pushing your agenda on someone else. It's simply recognizing the value that we all have inherently. Okay, and it's all equal. No one person is better or worse than another. We are simply all going through these different lessons together. Okay, so this leads me to some dreams that I had, which are really fun. And I have been struggling myself. Okay, so as far as like those markers go, yeah, I've got a few of those markers. And it goes back to, I can go back all the way to my childhood where I was the youngest in my family. I was 6 years younger than my next older brother, and I always felt like I was playing catch up, right? It's like, wow, they're so much smarter than me. They're so much bigger than me. I've talked about this in some other episodes too about feeling small. And so I was always playing that catch up. And so growing up, I felt like I needed to be perfect. I was always like the 4.0 student, and I wanted everything to be just right. And I had kind of this perfectionist syndrome that was never good enough. And it created a lot of psychological stress for myself. And it definitely is played out in the relationships that I have carried through my lifetime and the types of people that I ended up bringing into my life. But it's so fascinating when you can look at it kind of from the outside and get that perspective. So I had these three dreams, and I just barely put these together because I do notice certain patterns in my dreams, and I'll dream about similar things. And everything in your dream actually has a significance. You look at it as a symbol. Everything in your dream is you. Everything is trying to teach you something about you. And so it's messages that come from your higher self. I talked about this last week in the live stream. So if you missed that one, go back and take a listen to that one, because it really is such a great way to connect with your higher self and get messages and get advice and grow. Um, Meditation is, of course, another really good way. But anyway, so I had three dreams about underwear. And I promise this won't get kinky. But it was kind of funny. So, when you think about clothes, okay, clothes are how you show up in the world. Clothes are how you present yourself, right? It's that Apollo finger, totally is showing up in the symbology of the dream. So, underwear is that intimate clothes. In other words, how do you look at yourself? It's not how you're showing, like the rest of your clothes would be how you're showing yourself to the world, but that underwear is how do you actually look at yourself? So that would be that Jupiter finger I was telling you about, that index finger. So I had three dreams. The first one was back in June 26th. I was serving at a cafe before I went car racing. I had no underwear. Okay, so serving in a cafe. I used to own a restaurant, so I dream all the time about serving and serving people, and of course now I'm serving, but in a different way. And serving also, like when you serve food or beverage, this represents spiritual nourishment, which is what I strive to provide in all of my live streams, in all of my podcasts, pretty much in everything that I do. I try to help you with that. So when the dream was showing me when I had no underwear that I had no self-worth. It's like you need to build up your self-worth. We're gonna present this to you in a way that is funny and entertaining. Okay, so the next dream I had on June 30th at 5:55 a.m. Okay, so I don't know if you've and we may do a whole show on numbers at some point, but triple numbers like that, 555, is another message. It's a synchronicity trying to get your attention, and all numbers have meaning. Okay, so the five represents change. Okay, so now it's like, okay, here's a dream that's going to show you about changing. So I was walking with people called the Dutchmen. And by the way, whenever you have a dream about another culture or another race, these are like your higher self or your angelic assistants. Okay, so they were with me, and we went to a tree where there were clothes all over the tree, hanging from the tree, including underwear. And one of them turns to me and says, "You have that outfit." And these are all like nice new clothes, right? So anything that's new in a dream represents like, wow, you can put on something new. In other words, you can change the way you feel about yourself. And here's an opportunity for you to take those clothes and put them on. So that was the second dream. The third dream I just barely had last night, and I was working in my old restaurant. So I used to own a restaurant down in southern Utah called Tsunami Juice and Java. And I used to serve coffee and smoothies and breakfast and lunch and all kinds of stuff. I did this for years. And so I was in that store, I was serving coffee and smoothies, which again is like I'm serving up the spiritual nourishment for you guys. So I hope you're finding this entertaining. And I ended up going behind a curtain and I put on new underwear. And then I came out and I was serving this woman. So this is representing, wow, okay, my self worth. First, I had the dreams were telling me I didn't have enough, I needed to build it up. Then I was offered the opportunity to change in the second dream. And then by the third dream, it's like, wow, I'm actually putting them on. So it was a beautiful symbology that I feel I can share with you. And the bottom line is we can also take things that are symbols and we can turn them in back into our reality. So what your assignment is to improve your self-worth, and this is kind of where it gets sort of funny, is to go through your underwear drawer, okay, throw out anything that's old, anything that's got holes in it. It's time to get some new underwear that you feel good about, that makes you feel sexy. And of course, this also ties in with meeting a soulmate partner, meeting a relation, getting into a new loving relationship. It's like, well, you need to feel good um, underneath as well as outwardly. So it's not just about how we put on our clothes, but it's also how do our underclothes feel too. So anyway, that is something that you can do. And as you do things outwardly, it also affects you inwardly. So it works both ways. It's like a crossover. So as you change your actions and your habits, it also goes back into your subconscious and it helps you out there as well. So time to get some new underwear. That's the message. If you want to increase your self-worth. So anyway, I hope you find this really fun and enlightening. And if you want to learn more, just go to loveinyourhands.com. I'm actually teaching a whole new masterclass called Ignite Soulmate Love. And so you can join right there on the homepage. And I do it every single week. And you can learn all about how you can really dial yourself in to not just finding a partner, because that is not my goal. My goal is not to get you more dates. My goal is to help you actually get that long lasting love that you deserve, where you are happy, you're joyful, you're fulfilled, and you have somebody in your life, because life has more meaning when it's shared, and it just makes life so much more enjoyable. So that to me is a very worthwhile goal and activity. So thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited that you're here, and I wish you nothing but fantastic self-worth. So let's build it up, okay? Because that's how we stop those fatal attractions. That's how we stop being lonely. And I can't wait to connect with you again next week. So have a wonderful day, everybody. Take care. Thank you for listening to Love in Your Hands. Please rate, review, and subscribe to show your support. Have a question for Cynthia? Just post a comment. This podcast is sponsored by loveinyourhands.com, the place to find soulmate love fast. Start your free Soul Connection membership today, upload your hand photo, discover your relationship archetype, and start finding soulmate matches. Just go to loveinyourhands.com to get started.